Hello, and welcome once again to Escaping Dystopia, Defi Edition. My name is Wah, and I'll be walking you through today's episode. Today is, unfortunately, another episode that we have to talk a little bit about politics. As I'll reiterate throughout this series about decentralized finance, which I'll usually call DeFi, the biggest threat to cryptocurrency adoption and for it achieving its potential is overbearing government regulation. This episode is about what looks like the attempt to begin that by our government. Let me give you a little bit of context for some of this, and I'll walk you through my whole argument here. These are going to be interspersed with my comments, with some comments recently by SEC Chairman Gary Gensler. Gary has some interesting ideas that he won't really expound upon, but I will kind of explain to you the full extent of, I think, what his thinking is in this episode, to which I should say you should be very concerned about this. It looks like he's going to be declaring open war on DeFi, and I'll show you how that's going to happen. I'm just going to try and explain things to you pretty baseline. My passion for this is there, and this is all very interesting, as we'll get to. I'm not going to be yelling and screaming at you or Gary, but this kind of stuff should be very concerning, and I'll explain why here in a moment. All right, let's take a look here. Let's let him start.
Some of you might be starting off your freshman year of college. Others might be entering your final year. I bet that most of you are thinking about money in one way or another.
Yeah, most of the college students are looking at cryptocurrency as a way to invest for the future and be a part of it. You are about to slam those dreams shut.
Join a meal plan or buy groceries? Should I make coffee at home or at a coffee shop? I want to take it beyond those topics about your expenses. What I want to talk about is savings. Start saving early and save often.
Good ideas.
I know it sounds a little odd, you're still in college, but just for a moment, if you were to save $5 a week and you earned maybe 8%, starting off while you're in college, you may...
Hold up for a minute. There is no bank in the United States that offers an 8% savings plan or a return. There's none. On most savings plans and checkings accounts and stuff like that, your interest rate's going to be less than a single percent. Now, he may be talking about investing in the stock market or other investments, but he's not saying that here. And so what he's saying here is very disingenuous. This is what happens with him a lot, and it's really getting annoying.
You have $130,000 plus. Starting off while you're in college, you may have $130,000 plus saved by the time of retirement at 65.
So if you save that $5 a week, if you get this mythical 8% return from your savings account, by the time you're 65, you'll have enough for the down payment on a house. Yay. To say that Gary's a little out of touch with the economic realities faced by most Americans is an understatement. And we'll get to a little bit why about that a little bit. So this was a PSA that they did from the SEC chair, who won't answer some questions we'll get to a little bit, but he's putting out this thing for college students because I think somehow he thinks he's still a college professor. So to be very clear, this is kind of a clown show statement by Gary, and the fact that he won't answer any questions about where you're supposed to get this 8% return, and the fact that he recently made it impossible for these same college students to get a 4% return on savings through a cryptocurrency stablecoin. We'll talk about that in a minute too, as he mischaracterizes that entire aspect of the cryptocurrency world. And let's move on to the interview with the Washington Post. This was the big one that he did this last week, and it's got some interesting stuff in it. So let's take a look at that. I want you to listen a little bit to this, and we're going to actually, before we even get to Gary's first answer.
So let's start with the latest significant blip in the cryptocurrency world, and that's the dramatic drop in the value of Bitcoin and other tokens last night, down 8%. I want to ask you what that experience told you about the basic issue of crypto's stability as an asset and the need for some greater regulation.
Now, before we get to Gary's call for a huge power grab here, I've got a real concern here about this reporter being completely and utterly ignorant about how cryptocurrency markets work or the volatility involved. Drop or gain by 8 or 10% in the mature financial markets is catastrophic. In the time since this interview has been conducted, you've seen 3 or 4 days where cryptocurrency markets have gone up or down by 8, 10, 15%. This is how the market is. And that's one of the things that is, should be, it's definitely a warning sign to anybody getting in, but anybody who is aware of it, that's just what it is right now. This is a very young, global, 24/7 market, and it reacts very strongly to major news. This last week, there is major news out of China, including them trying to now enforce their ban on cryptocurrency use, period. Previously, they banned mining, then they banned their banks accepting deposits, and now they're banning any kind of transactions at all whatsoever. There's also their current real estate market imploding through the Evergrande situation. The Chinese investors can't pull, if they want to pull their money out of the real estate market because they see it imploding. That's why they had to say, no, you can't put it in crypto. And so there's all sorts of global things going on with these markets this last week, and these are reflected in them, which to me says that they are maturing and responding to real-world events as markets should. But the response and the setup of this question here is that this volatility in and of itself requires a clamping down on everything to make it impossible. We'll get to Gary's response here in a second and let him go through most of this.
For some greater regulation.
So, crypto tokens, what you promoted in this program called cryptocurrencies, even though some of my colleagues in the official sector shy away from that term, I'm comfortable using it.
I want to talk about this real quick. The reason he's saying that is because many of his colleagues think that the Securities and Exchange Commission has no role in regulating cryptocurrencies. Currencies are outside of their domain. So if you call these things what they are, the SEC has no power to regulate them. We'll get to that in a minute.
For a highly speculative asset class. I started and was honored to research this and study it and teach it at MIT and work with the computer science colleagues. And I think there are innovations in that basic white paper, so to speak, that Satoshi Nakamoto put out about a dozen years ago. And whomever she, he, or they were, we still don't know, had some basic innovations. But what we have now is an asset class that's highly speculative, stored on a digital ledger, and the values, as you said yesterday, went down, but they could go down dramatically, they could go up dramatically, and in often cases there's not something standing behind it other than what somebody else will pay you for it.
A couple things there that he says at the end. Something is only worth what you're going to pay for it. It's interesting that he says this, because this is what the cryptocurrency market is, which is absolutely true. Again, I've covered this and other things, but this is the same true for most things in the world. People are only going to give you what they're paid for them, except for this curious, it's weird because he actually kind of contradicts himself here, because securities, as the concept defines, is that there's something that they're securing, and so they're a promise to pay something else. And securities, when you're talking about companies and things like that, they're ownership of the company or bonds and stocks. So these are agreements and things for other assets. Whereas in cryptocurrency, the agreements are for the that themselves, their currencies, right? And he just he actually gave away the game right there, that these are not, these aren't securities. They aren't securing anything other than themselves. And their value comes from that. Now, we'll talk about some other things where a lot of cryptocurrencies now are to be used for pay for goods and services, including a lot of gaming things, VPN applications, cloud services, there's a few other I can think of off the top of my head, and there's hundreds that are popping up every day because of the NFT environment. But one of the things that's also he's being disingenuous about here is this very interview, and what he's talking about here, and what I'm going to point out to you in this next part, is part of what's causing crypto markets to react like they are. Again, the biggest threat to crypto markets is government regulation. This is the guy who's pushing to absolutely, totally dominate all of them with his regulation. He'll talk about that here in a second.